It's planting season and we're all eager to get out there and get our hands in the dirt and put great stuff in our gardens. Today I want to talk a little bit about plants that have toxicity, frankly, and they're really common plants that we frequently put in our gardens. They're not so toxic that you can't be around them. They're toxic in a way that if they're eaten or sometimes even rubbed up against, in the case of one of these I'll talk about, it can be problematic for dogs, cats, and toddlers, and that's where you really need to think about these things. So I'm just going to go over some of these things that are pretty common. You may recognize them and you may be surprised. The first thing I'm going to start with is lily of the valley, and you can see this has just finished blooming. It's spring and they're an early spring bloomer, and those little nodding white bells are so beautiful. People grow this in the shade for ground cover, and it's a lovely little plant, and it's one of the most poisonous plants in your garden, believe it or not. All parts are super toxic, but the danger of this plant is if the flowers are fertilized, and they frequently are, little red berries develop in the late summer, which are very attractive. Animals will eat them thinking they're just berries, and kids will pick them and eat them, and it can be fatal. It's a terrible thing. This is a plant to think carefully about if you have little children in particular. Flowering tobacco, a very beautiful annual. This is a dwarf variety. Tobacco, well, we all know about tobacco, and this actually is a tobacco, and it has nicotine in it, which is a toxin. As a matter of fact, a very potent insecticide is made from nicotine, so that tells you that it's toxic. Once again, ingested, not a good thing. The same is true for our beloved little begonias. This is not highly toxic, but if you'll get throwing up and diarrhea and problems if this is ingested. This is a young morning glory. Morning glories are super poisonous. I don't know if you've heard, but the seeds are banned in some states because they're badly hallucinogenic if eaten, but the plant itself tends to be toxic. Once again, this isn't a plant that most animals will try to eat, but sometimes they do, and it can be a problem. With this, it's a nerve toxin, so you'll get tremors and maybe even seizure kind of stuff. This is a foxglove, beautiful biennial. We love them, tall spires in the spring. This is digitalis, is the botanical name for this plant, and they make a medicine or synthesize a medicine that originally came from this plant for cardiac patients, and they only give a little bit because it's very potent. So if eaten too much, it causes cardiac arrest. This is not a good thing. It's a beautiful plant, but one to watch. Here's one that almost everybody has, a daylily. Who doesn't grow daylilies? Daylilies are allied to true lilies, and I want to emphasize that to cats, these are fatal if ingested. They usually cause kidney failure. This is particularly true. Be careful if you get Easter lilies and bring them inside for the season or whatever. It doesn't take very much and your cat can die. And some cats, it can vary from cat to cat with daylilies, how sensitive they are. But there are cases where cats have sort of just wandered through the foliage here, and then they sit down and groom themselves, and they'll get sick just from having rubbed up against the foliage and then grooming themselves. A little bit of the sap gets on them, and that's all she wrote. I wanted to make clear that with daylilies being so toxic, the same is exactly true with all the other lilies in your garden. Asiatic lilies, oriental lilies, the Orient Pet series, which is popular now, like Casablanca, the beautiful big white one. Really beautiful plants, divine smelling, gorgeous color, super poisonous to cats. Just beware. Here's another plant that we all love, and this is one of those big mophead blue hydrangeas. This is endless summer. I think most people know this. It's a reblooming variety. Typically animals don't bother it, but inexperienced animals will try, especially when the flower buds come up and they look kind of like chunky vegetables or something. They almost have a broccoli kind of look as the heads are, the immature flower heads. Those immature flower heads have cyanide in them, turns out. So that's something just to keep in mind. And it's particularly true if, I'm thinking again of toddlers who tend to want to go out and break flowers off and give them to you. Just be careful with that. This is Hellebore. And I think most people know that Hellebore is super toxic. I'm just including it because it's one of the most toxic plants in your garden. And fortunately, there's something about it that animals will avoid. They seem to know. In the garden, I've only seen it eaten once, and that was by a very young deer. And that deer is an ex-deer now. It would not survive eating a hellebore. But they're beautiful plants, bloom in late winter into spring, gorgeous evergreen foliage, fantastic perennial. I use them all the time in my designs. But just be forewarned. The only real danger to your pets with this is they make really good cut flowers. And if you cut the bloom and bring it in and either float it or stick it in a vase, sometimes indoor animals will want to check it out, and that can be a problem. Here is a southern favorite, the azalea. My goodness, who doesn't have azaleas in their yard? Azaleas, scientifically, azaleas are rhododendrons. They're all in the same family, and they're all toxic. And it's not just the flowers. Just ingesting a few leaves can be problematic. For full-grown animals, it's not fatal. They'll just make them really sick, make them, throw up and diarrhea, and they'll wish they were dead, maybe. But it won't kill them. For little animals, it's a little more dangerous because of the lower body mass. So this is rhododendrons. All the members of this whole family, the heath family, tend to be that way. Not only azaleas, but rhodos. Also, like mountain laurel, which we love to use, pyrus, which we use in our gardens. All of those have that capability of being toxic if ingested, if the leaves are eaten. There are a lot of plants in the arum family that we love to grow, both indoors and out. This is obviously a caladium, which we plant outside in the summer. And arums have a problem in that they all have little crystals of calcium oxalate in them. And when eaten, those crystals penetrate the lining of the throat and the mouth and the larynx and the pharynx and all of those things. And they are extremely painful to the animals, make them throw up violently, inflame the lining of the throat and the mouth, and cause long-term problems. They don't last forever, but it can be a few days before it dies back on your plants. And in my experience, these plants are ones that animals will typically try. I don't know why, there must be something about them. But in your wildflower garden, you've got jack-in-the-pulpits, same family. Calla lilies, same family. In the house, philodendron. Spathiphyllum, peace lily, same family. They all have this characteristic of these little crystals in them that are bad. And I've seen many animals try to eat Spathiphyllum, peace lilies, particularly when, indoor cats and when you put them out on the deck for the summer, so in the shade. So just beware of that. Another group of plants that are toxic but not hugely so, but I wanted to make you aware, are the ones with the milky sap, which are euphorbias. At Christmas we have poinsettias, and you break them and they've got the milky sap. There's a lot of common knowledge, so-called, that poinsettias are fatal, deadly. They're not. But they are, that sap is mildly toxic. And the same is true for this very popular euphorbia, which is called diamond frost, and we often plant it in our containers in the summer. It's a beautiful kind of billowing filler plant, but it's got the same issue with the milky sap. And here's a tomato. Tomatoes will make your animals really sick, and the only animal I've ever seen trying to eat these, the foliage are dogs, not cats, but and the fruits don't make them sick, but the plant itself will. So that's just an overview of some stuff to watch out for, stuff that most people try to grow, and that you just might want to be cognizant of. Just be aware that they can present problems in the wrong setting, and just know what you're doing with the plants that you buy.
For inspiring garden tours, growing tips, and garden projects, visit our website at volunteergardener.org or on YouTube at the Volunteer Gardener channel, and like us on Facebook.